Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build. If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.jet.build. Brian, welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for getting through our initial attempt of technology issues. I appreciate you sticking with us. Where are you calling in from today? Where's home base for you?
Phoenix, Arizona.
Awesome. That's awesome. So, I'd like to start off with a new question, as we just discussed. I know that you have 2 kids, which is awesome. If they approach you and tell you they want to join the military, what do you say? What do you do? What's your reaction?
So it's funny that you asked, because my 16-year-old has already approached me with that, and he sounds a lot like I did at his age. I asked what he wanted to do. He wants to do the same thing I did. My answer to him was, well, you better start doing PT, because you've got a long ways to go if you think you're ready. So, and we can get into that more later, but, as a former instructor for our indoctrination program to get in, I know that he's not ready. He might think he is, but I support him in whatever decision he wants to do, one way or the other. It's not something that I've pushed either one of my kids, but if they have questions about my service, then I'll answer honestly.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I mean, you, as you pointed out, and we will dive into it a bit more. I mean, you certainly have a specifically unique angle being in the position of, instructor. Out of curiosity, and we'll dive into more later, but just now that we're on the topic, do you have like a recommendation on a psychological kind of a level? Because the physical element is relatively easy in the sense that you can, monitor and track and have, KPIs per se. Psychologically, you can't really. So how do you kind of guide that process?
I mean, it's one of those things that you either have mental toughness or you don't. I mean, if you have a propensity to quit things when they get difficult, then you're not going to make it in any sort of special operations unit. Is there exercises you can do to kind of mentally toughen yourself up? I suppose. I mean, go out and put yourself in a situation where you're physically going to suck, and put yourself in a situation where you can't quit. Go get dropped off on a mountain in a storm or something like that, where you have no choice but to get to a pickup point where you told your buddy to pick you up in 3 days. Other than that, I mean, I don't know what you could do to sort of mentally prepare yourself. It's one of those things that you either have it or you don't. But certainly if you understand the game, then I think you're at an advantage.
Yeah, well said. I like to say, seek the uncomfortable and learn to enjoy it.
Yeah, you better get comfortable with it.
Yeah. All right, awesome. So we're going to do a life story. First, I'm going to kick off with your formal introduction. Brian Davis served 8 years in the 75th Ranger Regiment, 6 years in 2nd Battalion, and 2 years as a Regimental HQ as a RIP instructor, now known as RASP. Brian is a graduate of Ranger School, Jumpmaster, SERE High Risk Level-C, and Pathfinder schools. Brian deployed to Afghanistan in 2002 and to Iraq in 2003. Today, Brian is a project manager with the Opus group. Brian previously ran construction projects for Honeywell throughout Arizona. Brian holds a bachelor's degree in business administration from the University of Maryland's Global Campus. Brian enjoys woodworking, barbecue cooking, archery, and fine whiskey. Most importantly, Brian is a husband and father of 2 amazing kids. Brian, what's your go-to whiskey?
Just about anything from Buffalo Trace Distillery.
Nice. Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Blanton's, but certainly there's a lot of other very good stuff coming out of there. But they've captured magic in a bottle, so don't tell anybody because it's hard to get.
I'll have to cut that part out. I'll save it for me and you. All right, awesome. So let's kick off with childhood, where you grew up, and kind of what it was like, and what led you to service.
Yeah, so I grew up in Northern California, kind of between San Francisco and Lake Tahoe in the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas. back then California wasn't a terrible place to grow up. I'd never raise my family there now, but it was fun. It was a lot of hiking and rafting. Just I found myself to be happiest when I was outdoors doing stuff. Obviously, California's got good weather year round to be able to do that kind of stuff. But I grew up, in the hills where gold was discovered in the 1800s. So as a kid, you sort of fantasize about finding big gold nuggets. That never turned into reality for me. So, as far as the service goes, my grandfather served in World War II. He actually went in the Navy before the war started and sort of found himself in the war and served all the way through it.
Wow.
And he was, his ship was involved in the Battle at Coral Sea in, I think it was May of 1942. And then Battle of Midway, 3 weeks later, his ship was sunk and he spent 9 hours in the ocean learning how to swim.
Wow. And
then, my dad volunteered and served in the Marine Corps in Vietnam. And so I always had this kind of sense of patriotism and duty to the country. And I just wanted to serve the way my dad and my grandfather did. And so, but I wanted to chart my own path and do something different, do something more challenging. So when I was in high school, I came aware, as any high school kid does that knows everything, that I decided being a Ranger was for me, and I knew all about it, when the reality is I didn't know shit about it. But I knew that it was going to be hard and challenging, and so that's what I set my sights on, and I never let go of that until I got there.
Did your grandfather tell you that story or about his service, or did you find that out, some other way?
He told me about it. He never told me detailed stories about some of the horrific things that he saw. But his ship was sunk, or it was hit and damaged and listing hard at the Battle of Coral Sea, and they limped it back to, I think it was San Diego, and got it refit just in time to get back in the fight. It was only like 3 or 4 weeks later was the Battle of Midway, and then then they got sunk. So he's like 6 decks down on that ship, so I can't imagine the sounds and explosions and smells and everything that he would have gone through back then. So he didn't talk about it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's usually the case for World War II veterans, and I mean really just veterans in general. And so I'm always curious to try to pull out as much information from that era as possible. Do you know like how he literally swam to safety?
Well, he said that he didn't know how to swim when he went in the Navy, and it's funny to think that. And now I believe that the Navy. I know that the Marine Corps has at least basic swim tests. You've got to be able to stay afloat. But I imagine that he probably grabbed some sort of life preserver on his way to abandon ship. But yeah, he told me he spent like 9 hours in the water before he got picked up.
Wow. Yeah.
So
that's wild. What about your dad? Did he share any stories from his service?
Only the stories of being drunk. So wake up on shore leave and looking up and seeing the captain, yelling at him or something like that. No, he was in the Marine Corps. He did ordnance, loading ordnance on helicopters, things like that.
Yeah, interesting. And did any of your peers also enlist, or was it purely kind of your family that I guess instilled that desire for service?
Are you talking peers from like that I went to high school with?
Yeah, high school. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I've got one of my high school buddies. We actually served together in 2nd Ranger Battalion, but he was a year behind me graduating. And then I've got another friend that he went in, and then he went on eventually to make it into the Navy SEALs, and we still stay in close contact.
Man, that's really awesome to end up with a high school friend.
Yeah, in fact, we were roommates together, kind of how I met my wife, but we had a great time when we were in together.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So walk us through like the literal enlistment process. When did you do that?
So I came in on the delayed entry program, and I think I signed in 1994. You know, gosh, so long ago. That's what 30 years ago this year. So went to MEPS in Oakland, California, did all the physical and everything. And back then, that was the beginning of the Clinton years. And I remember filling out the form, and one of the questions on there said, "Are you a homosexual?" And then it was crossed out with a Sharpie. And we weren't allowed to answer that question because it was right after they came out with the whole "Don't ask, don't tell." But anyhow, went through the delayed entry. So I signed up my senior year of high school, and as soon as I graduated, I left I left August 1st of 1995. So it was like a month and a half after I graduated high school. And I sort of selected that day. I could have left like right after, because there was classes that started, shortly after I graduated. But in my mind was, I wanted a little bit of time to just enjoy not having school, and before shit got real, just kind of enjoy myself, but also take that time to make sure that I was in peak physical condition, ready going in. And it's interesting, like at that time, I spent my last 2 years in high school doing weight training, and a lot of that was agility training, things like that. In fact, my friend that went on to be a Navy SEAL, him and I were workout partners together. We didn't really play high school sports. We were just focused on conditioning our bodies because we both had this path charted out for us. I wanted to be a Ranger. He wanted to be a Navy SEAL. I told him he couldn't swim. He told me I couldn't shoot. So, we had that sort of internal competition. But we challenged each other every single day. And, I'd go out and run 5 miles every day. And so anyhow, I took that time after I graduated before I went in to just make sure that I was ready physically.
Yeah. And at that time when you enlisted, when you signed up, was there a direct program to try for Ranger Regiment, or did you have to go through Army?
No, it was in my contract. And I got told by other people that you could get that in your contract. In fact, I don't know why I remember this. It's called RGV, or maybe I don't remember. It's RGV 4 or something like that was the Ranger contract. And they were very clear. They said, look, all this does is guarantee you an opportunity to go try out.
Right.
The rest is up to you. And then, my response was, that's all I need is the opportunity.
Yeah.
So, basic training in the Army, they call AIT, advanced individual training, I think. And then from there, I went to jump school. And then from there, I went to what was then called RIP, Ranger Indoctrination Program. Now they call it RASP, Ranger Assessment Selection Program.
So, it's awesome to hear that you had kind of the foresight or the vision of where you want to go in particular, because a lot of times, people won't listen. They won't know those things like the contract element that you just said. How, I'm asking the question in the kind of perspective of providing others listening, kind of advice in that process of trying to get something in their contract. Like, what led you to figuring that out?
Just talking to people. I mean, when there's upperclassmen that say they're going in, and you hear stories, or they come back from basic training, come back and visit, and they've got this world of insight when really it's not even scratched the surface, but they come back to give you advice. Hey, maybe this guy went to airborne school and went to 82nd Airborne, but he comes back and says, if you really want to do the coolest stuff, see if you can get into the Ranger Regiment. So, I couldn't tell you where I first heard it. It was from some upperclassmen that came back and, went to a party, run into people like that. And that's just sort of how I picked up on it. And I ran with it. Al Gore hadn't invented the internet back then, or at least I couldn't afford a computer to figure that stuff out. So, everything was sort of word of mouth.
Yeah, yeah, well put. I mean, especially today versus when you enlisted, it's a massive difference. Where like only relatively recently are you able to even just search these things, whereas before you couldn't. To your point, awesome. So from enlisting to finishing jump school, what anything stand out in particular in that process?
But yeah, being a California kid from Northern California and going to Georgia at the beginning of August sucks. I remember like the first day standing out in formation, wearing PTs, just t-shirt and shorts, and I thought I had like 20 flies crawling on my shin. So when the drill sergeants weren't looking, I reached down to swat flies away. My hand came back wet, and then I realized I was sweating down my shins from the humidity. And so that was kind of an eye opener there. You think you understand heat when you grew up somewhere where it's 100 to 105 degrees, but you had 95% humidity, and it's a different ball game.
Oh yeah.
And then that's when you start learning and understanding what climatization is all about. Letting your body climatize. And then I remember doing canteen drills and shit. I don't know if they still do that, but the forced hydration, things like that. So it's just some of those things that stand out. But I remember growing up watching all those Vietnam movies, Full Metal Jacket, Platoon, things like that. And, me and all my buddies were like, yeah, we're going to do that shit someday. And so, we wanted the drill sergeant Hartman, we wanted to just get the full punishment possible, as many challenges as possible. So.
Yeah. Totally tracks. So finish jump school. What happens next?
So as soon as you graduate jump school, everyone else is getting their orders and shipping off to wherever they're headed. For us that had Ranger contracts, and they also let people volunteer at jump school if they wanted to go and try out. They'd kind of defer their orders to wherever they're supposed to go, and then if they made it through, then they'd get new orders to go to one of the 3 Ranger battalions. But anyhow, they collected all of us together, and it was like a mile run from jump school up to where regimental headquarters was at that time, and it wasn't a big hill, but it was up a hill, and so you've got your duffel bag and everything on your back, and this is your first time seeing an actual Ranger from the regiment. At that time, it was black berets, when the rest of the Army didn't have berets. And, they're at like a full-on sprint and screaming at you not to fall out. And you've got a duffel bag with everything you own in it, trying to keep up. So you get up there, and I mean, it's right away. People are quitting saying, screw this, But then I got up there, and the RIP class ahead of me had just started. So, and this was early December. And so basically we were just on detail for like almost 3 weeks. And then they sent us home on leave over Christmas, and then came back and started the next RIP class. The downside there was that you go home at Christmas and your whole family hasn't seen you, and everybody's trying to fatten you up. And I was like, no, I got to get back and keep running 5 miles a day and doing push-ups, because I got a PT test day 1 when I get back. And so yeah, basically for the first 3 weeks when you're a holdover, they just got you in all the shit details going around base, and you're still just a number no one pays attention to. You're just gum on the bottom of the shoe. So, but when I came back, this was January '96. Passed the PT test, and then after that, it was just Navy SEALs talk about Hell Week. This was Hell 3 weeks back then. But every day is their whole goal in life is to get you to quit. They want everybody to quit. One of my RIP instructors was Jeff Struker. And Jeff Struker was, he had just won the Best Ranger competition. He's, one of the key characters from Black Hawk Down. You see him character portrayed in the movie. And the guy was just a physical stud. I mean, and he's a man of God. So if somebody missed one word in the Ranger Creed or somebody said anything blasphemous, it was go get your PTs on, and it was like a 4-hour abs session in the afternoon. And so, the whole time, that the whole 3-week course was just people quitting, especially when we were out in the field. And every time they would put us through something that absolutely sucked, and they would say, who wanted to quit? Look to your left, look to your right. One of you is going to quit. And I kept thinking, that's not true. And sure enough, there'd always be somebody next to me that'd step forward, and I'd look at them. I'd be like, you just said you weren't going to quit, And, but, again, that just goes back to the mental toughness,
Mm-hmm.
And every time somebody bigger, stronger, faster than me quit, it just fueled me.
Yeah. Yeah. I was actually just about to ask you, because, that's really how I experience it as well. And I still experience it if I'm, for example, running in a park and I, see someone, it almost fuels you to do more. So I was going to ask if every time someone left, did that fuel you? And you already answered it.
Yeah.
A short step back, out of curiosity, everybody after jump school, when they asked if anyone wants to go try out for the regiment, anyone who kind of raised their hand, they were allowed to go.
Yeah, as long as they're in one of the career fields that the regiment had. I mean, if you were, I don't know, truck driver, we didn't have truck drivers, so it was, well, tough luck. But yeah, if you're infantry, medic, forward observer, mechanic, cook, anything that we had those MOSs in the regiment, then absolutely, it was come on up and try out.
And day one, approximately how many people do you think were there?
Well, I would say, there's people that quit just being a holdover. I don't know why. I haven't even started anything other than doing PT in the morning.
That's crazy.
And I helping you get ready, but people would quit then as holdovers. But when the actual class started, gosh, I don't remember. I remember in Ranger School, there's like 150 people in my company. There's only 29 of us that graduated.
Yeah, wow. So there had to have been more than 100, right? There would have to have been more than 150, for example.
It fluctuates. I really can't remember.
Yeah, no worries.
But I remember when I was at Regiment. It's funny, you go back years later, and now you're the instructor in the same thing that you went through, and it feels kind of weird. And then it just becomes repetitive, right? It's like Groundhog Day. It's just the same thing every 3 weeks, and it's monotonous. It's like, oh my God. And then you learn to just despise the students. And so then, all you want is for them to quit. And it's kind of a bit cycle, but that's just how it is. If it was easy, then there would be nothing special about it. And quick side story, I was a RIP instructor from 99 to 01. My last RIP class is when 9/11 happened. And one of the last things I did before I got out in late 2003 was every 2 years, the Ranger Regiment has what's called Ranger Rendezvous, and that's the change of command for the regimental commander. And it's like a week-long celebration. There's Ranger veterans. There's all kinds of activities, competitions, things like that. And I remember it was in the evenings. I was at some event, and I had these two young Rangers came up to me, and they said, "Hey, Sergeant Davis, do you remember us?" And I was like, "No," because at that point, when you see thousands of faces pass through, you just don't remember. And they're in a different battalion. And they came up and they said, "Well, you were one of our RIP instructors, and we remember you ran us so hard, everyone was puking, this and that." And they said, "We just wanted to say thank you for making it so hard, because now we appreciate why. At this point, they've already deployed to combat and stuff and come back." And and so that it sort of validates what you do and why you do it.
Yeah, that's an awesome story. It's especially awesome because it's one of those things where whoever has gone through it and then realized things only get harder or have the potential to only get harder, you then reflect on, okay, that's why the baseline is what it is. But having a story like what you just mentioned kind of validates it more than, what would otherwise be like an internal thought process. So that's an awesome story to have.
Yeah.
So in those 3 weeks that you mentioned, anything like in particular happens, or is it just like straight up, I don't know, smoking, like just PT all day for people to quit?
No, I mean, it's, the first few days is a lot of classroom stuff, teaching how to tie basic knots, map reading, land navigation, ranger history, just a lot of stuff like that. And then you basically go out and spend a week at a place called Cole Range, which is infamous within the Ranger Regiment community. And it's miserable out there. And that is really where those are the proving grounds for, do you have the fortitude to do this or not? Mm-hmm. It's day and night land navigation, learning patrolling techniques, things like that. But it's this big, huge open field that's maybe, I don't know, 300-400 meters from one end to the other. There's a sandbag circle with the drive that goes around it. It's probably changed now. I mean, I haven't been out there since 2001. So but I know it still exists, and they've updated the sign because I've seen pictures of it on social media and stuff. And it's still the place to go to prove your mettle. Do you have it or do you not? Do you want to quit or do you want to make it through? You got that. That's really the worst. You could call it the hell week of RIP or RASP. RASP has changed substantially since the days when I was in. So my understanding now is there's 2 phases, and I think it's 8 weeks long now, but it's a little bit more serious about preparing the guys for day one when they get to the battalion, to their unit.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, knowing, understandably so, that things have changed since. So, obviously we'll just talk about your experience and what it was like for you. So in your experience, in your time, what were kind of these phase blocks? Like, what did we just go through?
I'm not sure I understand the question. What do you mean?
Like time frames of, the phases of getting through RIP.
I mean, it was a 3-week course. When I was an instructor, I was teaching the same stuff that I went through. So back then, we didn't do any shooting. All they were doing was weeding out the weak. And once you got to battalion, once you got to your platoon and to your squad, it was up to those NCOs to actually train you what rangering is all about. But all RIP was to weed people out.
Yeah. Okay, I see. Yeah, so that was actually my confusion then, because I guess I'm actually more familiar with the RASP, platform, where they have different phases, and that's kind of why my question was confusing. So, all right, so go ahead.
So I was just recently at the 50th anniversary reunion for 2nd Ranger Battalion, awesome. And one of the things that I found out talking to some of the young guys that are there now is that oftentimes guys will finish RASP and they'll just send them straight to Ranger School before they've even, without stepping foot in battalion or getting to their unit. So now they're showing up. A lot of these guys are showing up. They've made it through RASP. Then they go through Ranger School. They make it through that, and then they hit the ground, and they don't know anything. And in my mind, the greatest days of my life, when I reflect on it, was being a Ranger private, because the shenanigans that you get to be involved in, but the camaraderie that you build with the other guys in your squad and your platoon. I mean, I wouldn't give that up for anything. And so, but when I went through, you get to battalion, you get to your squad, and then you had to wait your turn to get a slot to go to Ranger School. You had to prove yourself there that you're even worthy of getting a slot. And back then, I think the Army physical fitness test, you had to score like 60% or 50% to pass, which was pathetic. Yeah. Ranger School required 70%, and Ranger Standards was 80%. And so we had to pass the PT test at 80% just to be able to get a slot to go to Ranger School. But I was a Ranger private for, I don't know, 14, 15 months, something like that, before I got to go. But one of the things that best prepared me for that was, I got, I don't know, 6 months into being there. I remember my squad leader coming out of the, afternoon, called them poop meetings with platoon sergeant, all the squad leaders come out. And my squad leader comes to, give us all the details, information, what's going on the next day and everything. And he says, Davis, you're the new RTO, the radio telephone operator. And back then, it's not like radios now that are, I don't know, the size of my iPhone. They had some heft to them. It was 30 pounds for the radio and the kit bag. And then the batteries were 2.5 pounds each. They only lasted 24 hours. So, I was like, in my mind, I'm like, why did I just get screwed? And whose idea was it to give the scrawny white kid the radio? And it wasn't until much later that I realized that they put a lot of trust in me, or had a lot of trust in me, because they knew that I'd carry the weight, and they could count on me to be able to keep up. But also, you had to be smart in order to operate the radio and communicate and do all of those things. So, I did that for 6 months, and that sort of solidified, that I was somebody that was going to be successful there and be around.
Yeah. Those, you say 30 pounds, but I mean, I don't know. I remember those radios, and they definitely feel like 50 pounds, if you ask me. I don't know what scale they're on.
Well, yeah. Again, you throw 4 batteries in there. There's 10 pounds plus the radio, and then somehow you're responsible for carrying an extra 100 AA batteries for everyone else's vision goggles and lasers and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, we went to Panama in, I think it was like February 1997, and we did 9 days out in the jungle. I had 9 quarts of water on me, plus the radio, plus all these batteries. I mean, I was underneath like 100-pound rucksack or something like that. It was just ridiculous. And I remember like day 5, one of the team leaders coming up to me and asking me if I had any more water. And I was like, hell yeah, I do. And I poured out the 5-quart blivet out of my rucksack and topped him off on all his and it was miserable, but that was one of those things that absolutely prepared me for Ranger School, because when I went to Ranger School, they're like, oh, we need somebody to carry the radio. I was like, I'll take it. And they're like, well, we also need somebody to carry the machine gun. I was like, I'll take that too. It's fine. It doesn't matter.
Oh, that's great, man. So, before we get to that, just to kind of clarify timeline here. So you finish, what was at the time known as RIP. You get to your battalion. What kind of happens specifically in that transition period?
Well, I mean, being in transit's just being in transit. But once you show up, I remember being in headquarters company and in processing and everything, and the personnel people are like, I don't know if they're trying to scare us or what, but they're like, oh, feel sorry for anybody that goes to Alpha Company. If you go to Alpha Company, you're going to get lost in the halls. You may never be seen again, and so on and so forth. And I got there at the end of January, and there's snow on the ground. I think the whole battalion just gone out in the field that week, and they're in the snow, cold, miserable, which was standard operating procedure up in Fort Lewis, Washington. So then, anyhow, they in-process us, and they start calling off names like so and so and so and so. You guys are going to Charlie Company, so and so and so, Bravo Company, and then they saved Alpha Company for last. And of course, I got selected for Alpha Company. So then things are going through your head. They're like, oh man, I'm screwed. I'm going to Alpha Company. Well, then there's like one guy that that one NCO that comes over and picks you up. That's on, not out in the field. And there I am low crawling with my duffel bags across the quad in the snow over to Alpha Company. And then it was just like 3 days out. And then what I found out was that back then, just because you made it through RIP doesn't mean they don't want you to quit.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was an ongoing thing back then. You had to prove yourself each and every day. You had to show up every single day, and not to be better than the other privates around you, but to show that you're worthy of being there. You're worthy for the NCOs to invest their time in training you and preparing you.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and is that like training and preparation kind of a pipeline to Ranger School?
yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So what was kind of happening, generally speaking? I mean, I guess you did just mention a few stories, but I guess more so on a, I don't know, tactical, I'll call it, level. Like what were you guys doing?
It's funny you ask. At that time, we were like deep into training with miles gear because we were preparing for deployment to JRTC at Fort Polk that we went to that April. At that time, General Stan McChrystal was our battalion commander, and so all the training that we were doing was standard patrolling raids and things like that. Ambushes, and just training out in the field, right? But it was a lot of tactical movement, patrol bases, all of that stuff. But we were doing it with miles gear, so it was a lot of blanks, and then those stupid little laser harnesses that were developed back in the 80s. But it was there's a lot that I learned in that time frame. How to set up a patrol base, how it worked, priorities work. Fire control plans, things like that, all these things that go on. And then obviously we did a lot of close quarters battle back then as well. So we were doing a lot of shoot houses and things like that.
Mm-hmm. And all of what you're going through, kind of what you just said is kind of like a tryout still, correct?
Yeah, I mean, they're still asking you, especially on runs. Like I remember my squadron, he'd take off running, and me and the other new guy are out there in their road guard vest and a little cone flashlight. Every intersection we got to run up ahead of the squad and like block traffic. And then once they run by, we got to catch back up. But it turns out him and I were like two of the best runners in the whole squad. So other than my squad leader, like everybody else in the squad was falling out, the other NCOs and things like that. So I didn't have any problem with keeping up or any of the physical fitness stuff, because again, I prepared myself physically before I even went in. In fact, coming out of basic training, I was in worse shape than when I got there because they ran so slow, and they're just geared towards trying to get everybody through.
Yeah, I can see that. It's pretty crazy to think about. And then also, as you mentioned, right, you got sent home waiting for the next class to start. That's also not helpful when you're kind of in the mindset and ready to go. Yeah. So when it comes to time for Ranger School, kind of how do you get alerted of that? What did that feel like getting told you're going?
It feels great. Sometimes there's people that are more senior to you that have been there longer, and maybe their squad leader doesn't feel they're ready, and so there's a little bit of resentment when your number gets called, when your name gets called, and they say, hey, you're going to go take the PT test, and if you pass that, you're getting a slot to go to Ranger School. And you see these other guys that were there before you, and it's like, hey, sorry, bro, but I got to go. Because life as a Ranger private's fun, but it's also miserable. I will say that there was never any hazing that took place in the Ranger Regiment. That being said, there was some crazy stuff that happened after hours. And again, I wouldn't trade that for anything, but you want to go because once you come back with the Ranger tab, your life changes. You're respected by NCOs, officers. You're now somebody that people seek guidance from. It just opens doors of opportunity. And even though the school and the regiment have the same name in it, they are completely unrelated. There's one does not dictate the other. Right. But as somebody serving in the Ranger Regiment, you are expected to go and pass. And if you don't, then you are gone. So,
yeah. So, I mean, it really effectively is then, a tryout until you're through Ranger school.
correct.
So you get to Ranger school. Was that hosted at a different base? Like, did you have to fly somewhere?
Yeah, it's at 3 different locations. So it starts at Fort Benning, Georgia, and you have to forgive me because they renamed all these bases, for political correctness, and I won't get into that. But it was called Fort Benning. So everything starts at Fort Benning, which was back then called the home of the infantry. And that's where I went through basic training and jump school and RIF and everything else. So you go there and you go through first phase, which is Darby phase, and it's a little bit more abbreviated in terms of the field evaluations because the first week is basically going through all of your physical requirements, and they make it real tough the first week to start to get you sleep deprived and food deprived and everything. And it's just a lot of stupid stuff. You go and you get a penicillin shot in the butt. That's the old like toothpaste or peanut butter in your butt cheek. Then they have you sit on the gravel for 2 hours just to make it suck. And then, and then you go out and you go through the worm pit, or, crawling under barbed wire and mud puddles that the instructors take a leak in. It's all that stupid stuff. You're doing obstacle courses, and swim tests, and water survival tests, and PT tests, road march, all that stuff. And so eventually then they'll give you the classes on, this is how you write an operations order, this is how you write a warning order, this is what's going to be expected of you in the field, this is what you'll be evaluated on when your roster number gets called and you're put in a position of leadership. And so real quick, there's arguments that go on. Is Ranger School a small unit tactics course or a leadership course? I subscribe to it's a leadership course because you're never evaluated on small unit tactics. Yeah. Everything that's in the Ranger handbook right here
that's awesome.
is just out of Field Manual 7-8. And yes, I still keep that. It stays on my desk, and Chapter 1 on leadership is relevant. Everything that I do and anybody should do every day. But anyhow, your evaluation is how do you perform when you're placed into a leadership role. So your go, no go is you're a squad leader, you're a platoon sergeant, you're a platoon leader, whatever leadership position you get called for, you're being evaluated. Can you lead these people in austere conditions, with induced combat fatigue? So you go to go back to the phases. So Darby phase, Fort Benning, then you go up to the mountains of Dahlonega, Camp Merrill. You learn some basic mountaineering, and then you're walking all through the Appalachian Mountains for 3 weeks, and that's just a smoker. And then from there, you go down to Eglin Air Force Base, Florida, up in the Panhandle, and then you spend 3 weeks going through the swamps. And so if you've never had trench foot, that's the place to get it. You start to find what it feels like to have your skin rotting off.
So overall in that experience, any particular thing stands out that was hardest for you, I'll say?
I mean, it all sucks. I remember I graduated Ranger School in July of 97. So it was probably in June, and everyone that goes through Ranger School in a winter class always gives you crap like, you didn't go through it when it was cold. And it's like, look, I'm stationed at Fort Lewis. I've been out in the field when it's in the snow, so I wasn't a stranger to that. But I remember we were in a patrol base one night up on this spur on a mountain, and this massive thunderstorm rolled in, and everyone just said, fuck it, we're not pulling security. Ponchos got pulled over. I think I was on the radio that night, so I was underneath my poncho with a red lens flashlight, and just doing what I needed to do. But it was so miserable. And ironically, one of my best Ranger buddies from my platoon back at Fort Lewis, from from 2nd Battalion, he had recycled mountains. I caught up with him, and so we were there together, but we were in different companies in Ranger School. But afterwards, you get like a little break in between each phase to go clean all your gear and stuff your face with as much food as you can. But I caught up with him, and he's like, "Man, do you remember that storm that we had up on the mountain?" And I was like, "Yeah." He was being evaluated, I think, as a platoon sergeant that night, and he said that him and the other student that was the platoon leader got together, and they told everybody, just go to sleep. We don't care, just rack out. And he said when the RIs, the Ranger instructors, asked them why they did that, they said that they felt like that was the best thing to do, that the men needed rest more than anything else, and that they didn't think that the enemy would be operating in those conditions either. RI agreed and gave them a go. And I was like, you got to sleep all night?
Oh,
So
man.
that's kind of bullshit. But yeah, it was a cold, wet, miserable night, blowing in the wind and just thunder and lightning all night.
Yeah. I mean, that's, if I can list create a list of worst conditions, I mean, top 3 will be exactly what you just described. So yeah, I can see why that would have sucked.
I also got stung by my first scorpion in swamp phase of Ranger School, and I thought that I was going to get to go to the rear and get hot chow. And when I went to the RI, he just asked if I was allergic to bees, and in my mind, I was like, "Man, that's a stupid question." But I was like, "No, sir." He's like, "Well, then shut the F up and go pull through." And then you're like, "Oh my God, I have to just stay here all night." Now I'm in pain. So it's just one of those things you suck up and do.
Yeah. Going through it, if I understand it correctly, you can have service members from different branches, correct?
That's right.
Did you have that in your group, or was it only from Ranger Battalion?
No, well, Ranger School, there's people from all over the Army. We had,
right.
There's a couple of guys that were Green Berets. We had I know we had at least one Marine, I remember, in my company. And when I say company, they call you Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie Company. But again, by the time we were in mountain phase, there's only like, I think, 40 of us left out of the 150 that started. And then again, there's only 29 of us that graduated at the end of Florida phase. But yeah, we had a Marine. We even had 4. I remember we had 4 different international students. It was like a guy from Turkey, a guy from Mexico, a guy from Jamaica, and a guy from Poland. And I remember when we were doing the mountaineering training at the beginning of mountain phases, they call it Mount Yona, and you're basically just climbing and rappelling. You learn how to belay and things like that. I remember the dude that was from Jamaica, the Jamaican Army. They had him singing Bob Marley, Buffalo Soldier, as climbing up Mount Yona, and that was one thing that stood out. I just thought it was hilarious.
Yeah. That's crazy. I didn't know that they have like internationals also join that program. So out of the, that's also a crazy attrition rate, the 150, 60 down to 20, 30. Did any of those, well, I should say anyone out of Ranger Regiment finish with you?
Yeah, I can't remember all the names. It's been so long. I had a guy from 1st Battalion, and then another guy from 2nd Battalion, Charlie Company, that also finished with me. He was a forward observer. I think that might have been it. We had 2 West Point lieutenants that was in my platoon, my company, whatever. We didn't have a lot of West Pointers because it's kind of off cycle for them to go through, I guess. But anyhow, yeah.
Do you know if the internationals finished?
Yeah, none of them were in my company, so I don't.
I see.
I think that they get shepherded a little bit more, kind of different expectations for them. It's an experience and something for them to take back to their country and, kind of be a leader within their own military or organization.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you finish Ranger School. What happens next for you?
Uh, I go back and, again, once you come back and with your Ranger tab, then, it's a different world. You're treated differently. You've proved yourself completely at that point. So, I mean, I came back and, I don't know, I got to go through basic demolition course. And then basically they start preparing you to take over a fire team. So, I came back July '97. I was acting team leader for some field training thing that we did a couple months later, and then that December, right before Christmas, I broke my collarbone, snapped that in half.
Wow.
And so that sort of set me back for a few months recovering from that. But as soon as I got cleared to be back to full duty, then they sent me to, the first NCO course. And then I took over fire team. So then after that, it's just one thing that the military's great at, and I'm sure you know this, is succession planning, where they're constantly preparing you for that next level of progression in your career, that next rank, that next higher position. And it's so important, especially in any kind of combat arms career field, because and as we've learned over the last 23 years, that the guy at the front can take a bullet or get blown up at any time, and you may not have left the wire thinking that you're going to be in charge, but that shit gets real when that happens, and you've got to take charge. And so I think the military is real good about preparing people for that. So that's just how, they're also good. The military is also good about kind of letting you chart your own course, right? Like, these are the things that I want to do. All the schools that I went to are the schools that I wanted to go to.
So that, well, I mean, before I even ask about that NCO course, getting injured, how did you take that at the time?
I wasn't happy about it. It was just something that happened. It wasn't my fault. It was kind of another guy's fault, but the difference is, if I hadn't yet gone to Ranger school, they could have just released me for medical and sent me down the road. But because I just come back from Ranger school, now the battalion had invested so much in me, I'd proved myself. They want me to stick around, so they kind of hid me in one of the S shops and had me doing whatever I could. But I had a bunch of screws and stuff sticking out of my shoulder. So it was 3 months of recovery, and then after that, it was put me right back in, gave me a fire team, and let me run with that.
Yeah, I mean, I ask in particular because at least for me, I know it's super easy to get into a negative hole, psychologically, when you're injured and you can't perform, especially in that circumstance where your life is essentially to perform, right?
It didn't drag me down mentally. It was just, when it happened, and it happened right before Christmas, so I had to basically just suck it up for like a few days before I could even go see the orthopedic surgeon. And so once I went and met with him, and I remember the guy's name. His name was Dr. Greer Noonberg, and he had been a Green Beret medic, and then he got out and went to medical school and came back in the Army as a doctor. He's an orthopedic surgeon. And so I had a level of trust in him. I said, look, you know what it's like to have to, throw on a parachute harness or, throw on that 100-pound rucksack. I was like, I need to get back to being able to do everything that I was doing before. And he said, well, here's your options, because basically this thing snapped in half and the spike almost came up through the top of my shoulder. He said, we can put you in the butterfly where it just pulls your arms back. And he said that it might grow back together. You have a big lump, it'll be shorter. He said option 2, the traditional way, is we just go in, screw a plate down over it. You're going to have a big lump and your collarbone's going to be shorter. He said option 3 is you could try this experimental surgery that I've done 4 other times with good success for those that listen to me, listen to my instructions. And he sort of explained it. He said, look, there's this medical device, and it's generally used on the radius on your forearm. But basically, they drill screws into the bone on each side of the brick, and then the screws come out of the skin, and then it's like 2 handles with a pivot in between. And then they'll move it around till the bone lines up and tighten the pivot. And then it just holds the bone in place while it heals. Wow. He said, if you want to try this, it's your choice. But he says your bone should grow back exactly the way it was. And I asked him, I said, you know what it's like to be in a special operations unit. Is this the best thing for me? He said, yes. I said, then let's do that. And so we did. And so I had surgery on New Year's Eve. And of course, all my buddies were like, dude, we're going to come see you in the hospital. Nobody came. All those boys were out partying, having a good time, which I did. The only reason I got released the next day is because there's another guy from 3rd Platoon whose wife was in the recovery room next to me for something else. And they're like, you need somebody to give you a ride home. Otherwise, we won't release you. So my buddy gave me a ride back to the barracks. But no, it didn't drag me down mentally or anything like that. It was just, I was just focused on, I got to follow his instructions. He said I shouldn't be lifting anything while I've got this. So I didn't. And I followed his directions. And he ended up using like my x-rays and stuff for like a case study presentation to some, convention of orthopedic docs, whatever. And I guess now it's like a common procedure.
Wow. That's pretty awesome. That's just generally a cool story, and just amazing that worked. So awesome. So you get back, you go into NCO course. What was that like for you?
It was my first experience being with female soldiers in the Army. And I was just, this was 1998. So I was scared I was going to say something stupid, slip up. Because, when you're coming from an all-male unit full of a bunch of, fueled by testosterone and dirty jokes and stuff, you're just worried you're going to slip up and say something stupid. And then all of a sudden you're going to get slapped with some kind of charge or, Yeah. So I went there and I was like, I just need to keep my mouth shut and nod my head and do whatever the instructors asked and get the hell out of there. I didn't particularly like it that you're locked down. You had to stay there. You kind of, treated like a junior soldier and not, not an NCO. So I didn't particularly like it, but, it's something that it's easy for a Ranger to excel at because, they're like, oh, you're going to go out and do this land nav course. You've got 4 hours to do it and you're back in 40 minutes. You're like, is there something else I can do? And they're like, no, just sit over there in the shade. So, it's really just kind of an introduction to how the broader Army works and how you're supposed to measure junior soldiers and lead and mentor them, things like that. So to me, it was just something that you had to go through in order to pin on your sergeant stripes. And it's the same thing for each successive NCO rank that you pin on. There's some kind of course you got to go through beforehand.
Yeah, it makes sense. So you finish that, and now you get back to regiment. Sounds like this is, I'll word it differently. When you get back after NCO course, how much time is there between then and your first deployment?
My first combat deployment?
Combat, yeah, sorry.
That was 6 years, 5 years.
All right, so a lot of time. So I guess what happens in between those time frames?
So everything pre 9/11, we were just doing a lot of training deployments. I mean, like I mentioned before, in 1996, I deployed to Thailand for Cobra Gold, which is a big multinational joint military exercise that goes on over there. I think that they still do that. I don't know. 1997, I deployed twice to Panama, and then there's all kinds of other domestic places we deploy to and go train and stuff like that. 1998, we went to Germany. We were actually supposed to go to Africa. I think we were supposed to go to Senegal, and then like a week before we deployed is when those two embassies were bombed in Africa. I think it was in Kenya and Tanzania or something like that. And it was only Alpha Company that was supposed to go to Africa. Everyone else is going to Germany from the battalion. And so they canceled our trip there and sent us to Germany with the rest of the battalion. So it was just, again, pre 9/11 was just a lot of training deployments and, preparing for all of the various special operations that we were, expected to carry out, whether those were airfield seizures or, air assaults, raids, things like that. I left 2nd Battalion in September of '99, and then that's when I went down to Regimental Headquarters to be a RIP instructor. And again, I was already on orders, and 9/11 happened like the first day of the last RIP class I was teaching. And my fear was that they were going to freeze my orders and make me stay there.
Right.
And I didn't want to go through another Groundhog Day of just, every 3 weeks it's a new group of faces that, think that they're, the baddest soldiers on the planet because I just came out of airborne school. But they didn't freeze my orders, so I left. I PCS back up to 2nd Battalion. I actually got a speeding ticket on the way back, and the cop understood and he wanted to let me go, but he said it was the plane that paced me. But I was like, I need to get back up there because, we all knew that we were going to be deploying somewhere soon. So yeah, I got back up to 2nd Battalion, and I ended up in the same platoon in Alpha Company that I had left 2 years prior to that.
That's great.
So from there, I was the weapons squad leader in charge of 3 machine gun teams and the employment of them, whether mounted or dismounted, and the second senior NCO in the platoon. So we went to we did some deployments to Fort Bragg in early 2002. And then right after we got back from that, then we left and deployed to Afghanistan. That was right after Operation Anaconda had wrapped up.
So on September 11th, you're starting your last RASP class. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, I was teaching kids how to tie knots with a parachute cord. And I, literally walked in the building and the first tower had been hit. And, the kids on CQ duty are like, hey, Sergeant, check this out. I was like, man, that's crazy. And then I walked back 15, 20 minutes later, and they're like, the second plane hit the other tower. And I knew at that point we're going to war. So
yeah. Wow. That's wild. Was that 2-year time frame? Is that like typical rotation?
To be down there? Well, 2 years was like the minimum amount of time that you had. If you PCS, you had to stay at that duty station for 2 years. I probably could have left regiment earlier and gone next door over to 3rd Battalion if I wanted to, which I didn't. But, having the exposure, being at regiment and meeting NCOs from all the other battalions, I think ultimately was good for me. You get to learn other perspectives and value those perspectives. Guys have different experiences in different battalions. And for as much trash talk as we do, they all know that 2nd Battalion's best, but you build those relationships, and the more senior you get, at some point you're likely to leave the battalion that you sort of grew up in and go somewhere else. And so when you've got familiar faces and other people, or even if somebody comes, like people would come to 2nd Battalion that no one else knew them, but I knew them. So, it was good for relationship building things.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So it sounded like there's, at least close to a year, if not a year plus minus, between 9/11 and your deployment to Afghanistan. What's headspace in that time frame like?
Well, it wasn't that long. It was maybe 6 months.
Okay.
It was just, a lot of anxiousness. Everyone wanted their shot to go, and Um, you know, 3rd Battalion was the first ones to go in. They went in I think it was November of 2001 when they jumped into Objective Rhino in Afghanistan. And so, you know, there's that little bit of resentment, like, you know, why did they get chosen to go and things like that. And then it's just waiting on your battalion's number to get called, and, you know, things go in numerical order, right? So 3rd Battalion went first. So then after 3rd Battalion, then it goes back to number 1. So 1st Battalion went, and then they were there during Operation Anaconda and Battle of Gar, Roberts Ridge, and that whole QRF to go and get those guys off the mountain. And then we're the next ones to go after that. So 1st Battalion came when they redeployed. That's when we went over.
Yeah, got it. Okay. Yeah, so that makes more sense. Not as long as I originally thought, just from the literal years. All right, awesome. So walk us through kind of some of that deployment, whatever comes to mind in terms of sharing.
You know, that deployment was for the most part kind of quiet. I mean, I'd say at that time, CENTCOM and, you know, our Combined Joint Task Force, everyone is still trying to learn how do we operate in the same battle space and share it and everything else. And, you know, because it was pretty unconventional, right? You got the Taliban, you got Al Qaeda, but, you know, everybody's just dressed in civilian clothes. And then, so it was, they were still trying to, I feel like the military overall was trying to get their footing, understand how do we operate. So when we were there after Anaconda, it was a little bit quiet, to be honest. There wasn't a lot going on. And just like, you know, years later, I went back to Afghanistan as a contractor, and, you know, people talk about Iraq and they'd say, we're at camp such and such or camp such and such. And both when I was in Iraq and when I was in Afghanistan in 2002, there weren't camps. There wasn't anything. You know, nothing had been named. There was no services that were really brought in. It was just, you were at some outpost near some town, you know, otherwise you're in Kandahar, you're in Bagram, you know, or whatever, but there was no camps.
Yeah, interesting. Well, what was your kind of daily mission set?
And it was, I don't know, you could say we did some movement to contacts. It was trying to, I mean, we were trying to go out and find a fight is what we were trying to do. But after Operation Anaconda, I think you know, a lot of these guys had retreated back over the border in Pakistan to kind of regroup. When I was there, I remember that was during the first elections in Afghanistan. They call it the Boya Jirga, and that's when, you know, they had the purple dye and stuff on their fingers. And so we were there kind of as part of, you could sort of say part of the force to make sure that they had safe and secure elections. And there wasn't really any fighting that was going on during that time. So it was a lot of just, you know, we were building up these outposts, you know, trying to use the little e-tools to stretch out rocks to fill up ESCO walls. You know, I remember, here's a funny story. I remember we were at this outpost, my platoon sergeant and I were talking, and all we had for restroom facilities was a couple half 55-gallon drums and some plywood, you know, porta potties that were hand built. And so everybody's shitting in these buckets, and it was just like something out of a Vietnam movie where you'd have to drag the bucket out and throw gas and diesel in it, and then you'd light it on fire and you'd add a stir it to keep it burning, and then that's how you got rid of all the shit. And so my platoon sergeant and I are having a conversation. All of a sudden, black smoke hits us with just the smell of burning shit. And I look over, and there's one of my privates with his gas mask on, stirring the shit barrel, but he took the barrel upwind, so it's all just blowing straight in the camp. So it wasn't a good day for him after that. But
No.
but yeah, there, you know, there wasn't a lot of fighting going on that deployment, to be honest.
Sure. So that deployment comes to an end. I mean, first of all, did it last what you expected in terms of time frame?
Yeah, we do shorter deployments in special operations, at least in joint special operations, and so we were over there for like 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay, yeah. So
it's a little
that finishes. Yeah, go ahead.
It's a little bit better than conventional forces where they're over there for 12 to 15 months.
Yeah.
We would do shorter rotation, but then we're going back and we're hitting our full training cycle before the next deployment comes up.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, you finish that deployment. Sounds like you then go to another training cycle. Does that get you ready for Iraq?
Yes. I would say when we came back from Afghanistan, we didn't know that Iraq was up next. There was talk and speculation. We did a training deployment in November of 2002 that at that point we sort of knew, okay, this is a dress rehearsal for what's coming next. And we did some pretty good training on that deployment, desert environment, a lot of live fires, stuff like that. So, and then it was after that we did some standard Army infantry training and testing, and then we deployed in February of 2003 over there to stage and get ready for the invasion.
Mm-hmm. So what was that? Walk us through that deployment. What was that like?
I can't say where we staged from, but it was interesting. We got there, and the only Americans that got there before us was like a reservist Patriot missile battery, and so we got there and we start setting up, command and control tents and things like that. We're literally at like a airport in the middle of the desert in the Middle East, and we're starting to set stuff up. Well, these guys, it's like, I don't know, 15 guys that are just Army reservists, and they come over and they're like, "Oh, you guys are Americans. We're so glad to see you." And I don't remember where they're from, Ohio or Kansas or wherever. And they're just excited to see other Americans. We're like, "Well, how long have you guys been here?" And they're like, "Oh, we've been here for like 2 weeks with nothing to do." They got their little missile launcher and their command and control station, whatever. And they said the most random thing. They're like, "Do you guys want Pop-Tarts?" And we're like, "Pop-Tarts?" They're like, "Yeah, some Air Force plane came in a few days ago and dropped off a pallet of Pop-Tarts." So anyhow, but what was interesting was from the time we got there, and I mean, we were like I said, we were putting up tents, building kind of the base defenses. We started filling sandbags and putting up security positions around the perimeter of this airport. We created a firing range and all this stuff. But like within 5 days, it went from like us and these Patriot missile guys to like 5,000 people.
Wow.
Just overnight. Like the planes were just coming in, and all of a sudden it was like a tent city. I mean, It was, the logistics of it alone were just mind-boggling how quickly it got built. And then once we went into Iraq and once we went into Baghdad, I would imagine, I didn't see it, but I would imagine it was just a vacuum where all that stuff just disappeared and moved, from there into Iraq.
That is wild. Yeah. Wow.
So
progressing forward.
Yeah, just progressing forward. I remember, number one, we were supposed to jump into Baghdad, at that time it's called Saddam International Airport. We were supposed to jump in, and I was going to be one of the Jumpmasters, and we were going through our Jumpmaster rehearsals and everything for that. And the Air Force came and said, "Hey, we're not flying our aircraft anywhere over the skies of Baghdad." They did some kind of analysis and found that Saddam had like 3,000 anti-aircraft artillery pieces, per quadrant of the city or something like that. And so they canceled the whole thing, and they said, "Well, 4th Infantry Division is coming up from the south so fast, we're just going to let them roll through. What that at that time, the forces coming up from the south were moving so quickly. You had the whole debacle with the Jessica Lynch thing, where they weren't securing anything. It was just a race. It was like the whole Patton versus Bradley thing, like who could be the first ones to Berlin. It was the same thing. Everyone was racing to try and be the ones to say they took Baghdad. So long story short, the ground forces rolled through and then they took Baghdad. We were getting ready to fly out on helicopters to go into Baghdad and start establish our base of operations there and start branching out and conducting missions from there. And there was a sandstorm that came in, like the entire region, and it shut down all aircraft for like 3 or 4 days. I can't remember. And people in Arizona are like, "Oh, we've got sandstorms here." When I first moved here, and I was like, "Oh, how long do they last?" They're like, "Oh, they can last an hour." And I was like, so yeah, I mean, if you've never experienced being in a porta potty in 120 degrees in a sandstorm that's going on for 5 days where you can't see your hand in front of your face, that's a whole nother experience. But anyhow, so we get into Baghdad at the airport a few days after ground forces come through because of the sandstorm. And from there, we started conducting operations, in and around Baghdad and then north of there. So, and the funny thing is back then, before the counterinsurgency and everything, again, there we were, ready to fight, looking for a fight, and all of Saddam's forces were fleeing. And we're driving around in Humvees that had no doors, no wind, like we kicked the windshields out of them. We're just rolling with goggles and, the schmogs over our faces and everything, and we're looking for a fight. And
wow.
We found some, but not what we were looking for. But we ended up seeing some cool stuff. I mean, it was just the Wild West. I mean, when you go in and you're part of an invasion into a country, and you see, and there's people just fleeing. I mean, it is the absolute Wild West. Wow. And as a leader, you've got to be one of the ones that reminds everybody that you've got to behave. You can't, you have to be a decent human, and the people that are left behind, you've got to treat them with respect and decency. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I remember we did is, the MREs, which we were sick of eating after like the first week, but every meal came with some kind of piece of candy. We started collecting all that stuff and just throw it in an MRE box. And then when we went out on missions, you see all these kids, that, I mean, it's just a poor country that's been repressed by Saddam Hussein for so long. And so we just tossed out the candy that we didn't want anyways and give it to the kids to try and win hearts and minds, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Any I don't know, mission in particular come to mind? Any story that you'd like to share through that deployment?
I don't know what I can and can't say.
Right.
All kinds of non-disclosure agreements about what we can't talk about. So, I will say that before we went into Baghdad, we did one mission. This is kind of a funny story. We had like a 3-hour infill on Black Hawk helicopters, and the primary means of insertion was that we were just going to land and get off the helicopter, but we had fast ropes with us in the event that, at each HLZ, if there was obstructions and stuff, we had the ability to just fast rope in instead. Our fast ropes hadn't arrived in country, and at the time, our battalion was split. We had part of our battalion was in Afghanistan, supplementing, I think it was first Ranger Battalion, and then the rest of the battalion was in Iraq for the invasion. So we didn't have our fast ropes, so we ended up borrowing fast ropes from, I'll just say from the SEAL team element that we were with. and so we had their fast ropes on all of our birds, and it was a joint mission with them. So at 20 minutes, I get the call over the headset, and that's when we were going to open the doors to the helicopters after this long infill. So I get the call. I look back at the crew chief, who's on the left door. I'm on the right door. We give each other the nod, and I open the door. And as I open the door snags the bag that the rope is coiled up in, and it pulls the bag out. And so I look out the aircraft, and I watch the fast rope extend all the way down. You got a 90-foot rope, and then it starts going straight up towards the tail rotor. And so I quickly pulled the quick release and just jettisoned the whole fast rope. And I look back at the crew chief, and he's giving me the big thumbs up, and so I ditched in the desert. We did the mission, and a few days later, my executive officer comes up to me. He's like, "Hey, Sergeant Davis, we were short some equipment that was on your aircraft. Do you know what happened to this missing fast rope?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, sir. I can give you approximate grid coordinates." I said, "Is that 2 hours and 40 minutes into our 3-hour infill when we opened the doors, and the door snagged the bag, and I jettisoned it before it hit the tail rotor and down the aircraft, and we all crashed and died." He's like, "Oh, never mind."
I mean, I would love to know your kind of heart rate, adrenaline in that exact second to go and pull the release.
At that point, I'd been a fast rope master, long enough, but it's awesome. Something you do without thinking about. It's like, if that hits the tail rotor, then we're all screwed. Yeah. So, it's not coming out of my paycheck. I know that. So I jettisoned it, looked back, and the crew chief was really happy. So I knew that I made the decision.
That's some great quick thinking. That's for sure. So, as you kind of, closing out, I guess, this deployment, in hindsight, this might be difficult just in the sense of what you can or can't say. Is there something that you had like expectations and then something different happened, in terms of like what advice you would give your younger self?
In terms of being in combat?
Yeah, in terms of that deployment, yeah.
I would say that I was fortunate in that, before 9/11 happened, I had already been in the service for 6 years. I had a lot of really good training, both, through schools and just, experience doing training exercises, live fires, things like that, with the best the military has to offer. So, I felt very prepared, but I mean, as prepared as you are, nothing can replace the adrenaline you feel the first time bullets start flying. Like, your mouth gets dry, and and then you become very aware of what's going on around you. So, I don't know that there's anything you can tell somebody that hasn't been there to prepare them. I was just lucky that I had years of preparing for that moment before I got to that moment. Because, to be a new guy, I don't know, they say ignorance is bliss. So maybe they're in a better position, coming after training, just showing up and going on a deployment like that. But
yeah, I mean, if I had to choose, I would choose your version for whatever that's worth. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So coming to the end of this deployment, what happens next from there?
Not much. Came home, and after that, it was just, high fives and parties, and happy that everybody made it back. We had a few guys that got wounded on that first deployment. There was a kid from my platoon that on that mission that I jettisoned that fast rope. The bird that he was on, a bullet came in through the door right as we were infilling, and it went in kind of through his armpit, through the body armor.
Wow.
And it came straight out the center of his chest, and the bullet got caught on the inside of his body armor. And anyhow, long story short, he the flight crew held him on the aircraft because he wanted to get off and do the mission, even though he'd just been shot. And they yanked him back on, took off, got him to the called the J-Mal bird, basically flying hospital out in the middle of the desert. And I think it was like 3-4 months later was the Sound and Arrows run that happens in Tacoma every year, and he was on our 10K team that won first place. So, I mean, that just goes to show the toughness of Rangers. Like, you get shot, a bullet comes out your chest, a few months later, you're on the winning team of a 10K. You know, just bring it on every day. You know, that's what we want.
Yeah, awesome. So you're back, and I think this is kind of toward the end of your service, correct?
Yeah, that was the end. That was pretty much the end. The last thing I did was go to the Ranger Rendezvous, which I talked about earlier. I was a primary jump master for that jump. It's when the entire regiment jumps in at Fort Benning. Obviously, this is the first Ranger Rendezvous where it wasn't the whole regiment, because at this point we've got people in Afghanistan and Iraq on a regular rotation. So, so it's scaled back a little bit, but yeah, that was the last thing I did. I jump mastered that. We, you know, went down there and had a good time for a week, came back, and then I started out processing. That was pretty much the end of it.
What was kind of your thought process, or I should even ask, like, at what point did you start thinking about, you know, concluding your service?
I had thought a lot about it. I had thought about staying in. The last couple years, my body was starting to feel the effects of just all the physical punishment. And I kind of thought, you know, maybe if I stay in, I'll drop in a flight packet and go be a helicopter pilot, because they don't have to carry anything. But you know, I before I got out, I made the promotion list to E7, and you know, my chain of command really wanted me to stay in. But I had a lot of reasons to get out. You know, number one, I checked off every box of everything I wanted to do in the military. I'd been a Ranger. I'd been to all the schools that I wanted to go to. I had 2 combat deployments, but I also had made a commitment to myself that I never wanted to let myself get in a real serious relationship while I was in, because I never wanted to put myself in a situation where I was conflicted in my decision making. I wanted to make the decision that's best for the people around me every time, without any regard for what was waiting for me back home. And so I just felt like it was time for me to move on to the next chapter of my life. If I had stayed and I'd pinned on E7, I would have had to have left the regiment, because as you get higher in rank, there's less jobs available. And they called I think there's 6 of us that made the list in August. I think it was August that year. And they said, congratulations, everybody. We don't have any platoon sergeant jobs open. You're all going to have to leave. And so I didn't want to leave the regiment and go do that. I didn't want to go take a staff job. You know, I was there to do the fun stuff. I wanted to be the one on the trigger, be the one kicking in the doors, doing all the fun stuff. And if you can't do that, then to me, it was like, you know, it's just time to move on to the next chapter.
Yeah, that tracks. So I guess you put in your package to finish your service. Talk to us about that process and what that was like for you.
Back then, the transition process out was, in terms of what the Army offered or required you to do to prepare you for life outside the military, it was really kind of a joke. You know, they'd give you a worksheet and say, here, fill out this worksheet. That'll help you kind of write your resume. And then they said, you know, go to this website and type in your MOS, and it'll tell you what civilian jobs would be good for you that you're qualified for related to what you did. Well, once you type in 11 Bravo in a computer, something that's supposed to say what you're good at, it's like, well, you can be a security guard or cop. And so there, you know, I filled out the worksheet, you create a resume, and it's a joke. Like, you don't know, I didn't know anyways, what I wanted to do afterwards, you know. But you know, I was already engaged at that point, and my wife and I got married right after I got out of the Army. She had just commissioned and was going in the Army as an officer, And probably getting ahead of you here a little bit, but yeah, the transition out, they really didn't do anything for me. I would say it didn't benefit me. I found no value in the transition assistance that they gave me at that time.
Yeah.
Now, I'll take some responsibility on that too, because like I was still just a kid that didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up, and maybe I should have stayed in for that reason. So
yeah, that point right there is interesting, because from the show I've heard a lot of great perspectives of veterans who actually thought about that process, or they had some command that was willing to kind of help them start thinking of, okay, well, what's next for you, and that, from what I've just heard from conversations, it seems like that's a really big differentiator in soft landing versus hard landing, going into civilian life. And also, by the way, from what you said, if I typed the 11B in a computer and it gave me those two, potential options in civilian life, I would suggest that it's actually doing more harm than good, because it's just, pigeonholing you.
Right. Now I know that there's a lot of nonprofit organizations that, at least related to the Ranger Regiment guys, people that were senior officers, senior NCOs, that have created these great foundations, like Three Rangers foundations, where, they're taking guys that are going to transition out as much as like a year and a half in advance, and they partner them with mentors of, hey, these are the geographic parts of the country that I think I might want to end up at afterwards, or I'm going to go to school for this, and then I want to get in this career field. And they'll start matching them up with, former Rangers that are in those career fields and things like that. So
that's awesome.
It's way better now. We didn't have any of that back then. I think that's why guys like Mike Hull started these organizations that are helping these guys, so they don't end up being a jackass like me, and they're better prepared. But
on that point, and I mean, on that joke, at least now it's funny. We're about to get into a transition. I don't know if it was as funny at the time, but I was about to say, well, out of curiosity, it's interesting to see how you landed where you are without that support. So, to that point, like what happens next, right? So you finish service, you get home.
I got out, got married. And, my wife and I ended up just going to the courthouse and did the whole justice of the peace thing. She was on orders to go to Germany, and it was like, well, we planned doing a traditional wedding, but it was like, well, if I was going to be able to go with her, then we had to be married before she left, before even they shipped our stuff. So we just went down to the courthouse in San Antonio, Texas, because that's where she was down there going through officer training before she moved to Germany. And so we got hitched, and then we moved over to Germany, and it's not a lot of opportunities for just a spouse of a military member in a foreign country. So but what there is opportunity for is education, because every military base out there has an education center, because the Department of Defense wants smart people in the military, not dumb people, and they've always put a lot of emphasis in furthering your education, both in military schools, but also in civilian education. And so, so that's what I did. I basically said, okay, my job is to go to school. And just like being a Ranger, I put 100% of my focus and attention and effort into that. And so, after the first semester of pulling straight A's, my wife made me a bet. And, if somebody tells me I can't do something, then I'm going to do it. So I graduated with straight A's because she challenged me. Yeah. So, we had a good time in Germany. We didn't have kids the whole time that we were there, so we got to travel all over Europe during that time. Awesome. The GI Bill more than covered my my college, although I thought it was kind of screwed up that I went and I went through college, graduated on the old chapter, it was chapter 30 GI Bill, and then 2008, 2009, they come out with post 9/11 GI Bill that was way better. So then guys got a lot more money than I got. But anyhow, I'm not clear about that. So we traveled all over Europe. I got my degree in business, and then in advance of her getting out, I moved back to the States after graduating college and got my first job. Got hired in late 2006 to be a financial advisor, and that lasted until the middle of 2008. And anybody listening to this that remembers 2008 financial might understand why that wasn't a good career for me anymore. So, it was good to learn about financial markets for me. You know, I found it very interesting and stuff like that, but I just didn't like being in a sales oriented job, especially not one at that time like that where people accuse you of stealing all their money. So
right. I want to take a pause and a step back. Curious, you know, at what point did your wife enlist? Like, was she enlisted that entire time, or did she enlist like midway through your service?
No, she was kind of finishing up college when we met. She was on an ROTC scholarship. So
I see.
So she was, I think, about the time I was deploying to Iraq is when she was commissioning as a second lieutenant. And then when I came back, you know, she had already commissioned and was waiting on her orders to go down and go through her officer training.
So, I mean, it's a really unique, that's amazing. It's a really unique kind of circumstance, especially in the switch process, right? What kind of advice do you have for others who are, you know, potentially in that kind of a scenario?
Swallow your pride. You know, when you go from being a very well-respected kind of senior NCO that everybody, you know, comes to or wants to emulate or, you know, wants your advice or input or this or that, and then all of a sudden you trade in the, you know, at least back then, as a green ID card for a pink ID card. Now you're just a spouse and nobody cares who you are or what you did. And so, you know, for 3 years that I was in Germany, I just didn't tell anybody that I was a Ranger because I didn't want questions. And so I just tried to stay obscure, you know? But yeah, it was hard, you know, especially at that time. You know, when you think about what was going on in the rest of the world, we got to Germany in December of 2003, and through 2004, 2005, 2006, that was some of the hardest fighting that was going on, especially in Iraq, with all the counterinsurgency stuff going on over there. And so you hear little tidbits and stuff in the news about special operators, this or that, and again, because I don't know, that I wouldn't say the internet was new, but, you know, like when I got out, most guys didn't have email addresses, you know. A lot of guys didn't have cell phones. If they did, is like I couldn't call them from Germany. I didn't have a cell phone when I was in Germany. So you lose. I lost contact with a lot of guys, and so your finger's off the pulse of what's going on.
Right.
And then it sucks. It's hard. And, you know, and I was just a spouse. And so it was difficult. I would say that it was difficult for me to cope with that, but it was just one of those things that I had to accept.
Yeah. And when did your wife finish her service?
So she got out the end of 2006.
Okay. Oh, so that was around that timing, I think, what you were alluding to, right? When you moved back, and then she moved back, I guess, shortly after you finished your service. Okay, cool. Yeah. And now generally speaking, overall, you know, any advice, marriage advice, right? Both of you being in service, you being deployed, and coming out of that. I mean, it's a crazy situation, and it's awesome that, you know, you guys are still together with kids.
Yeah. I would say for anybody that's out there that marries an officer and the officer asks you to shine her boots, do what I did. I told her that I would shine one and she had to shine the other, knowing that she'd have a tough time getting them to match. So I got out of that one.
Nice. There you go. That's the key. So I wanna also expand a little bit on that transition period, and granted, you provided the goal, which is as far again as I hear from a lot of veterans is really key in transitioning. Your goal in this circumstance was education. Nonetheless, as you just brought up, you understood you know the Rangers, like your former teams, were still deployed and a lot of action was happening. Psychologically, kind of how did you know move through that phase and gradually get yourself into civilian life?
Well, I mean, college to me was easy. It was like being a Ranger private again. Here's what you need to do, and then you
Yeah.
just go and do it. As long as you do what you're told, then you get a good grade, and then you move on to the next. So this school thing for me was easy, which is ironic because I wasn't a model student as a kid growing up. I did fine in school when I paid attention, but I found myself not interested generally in what was being taught as a kid when I was growing up. So if I didn't pay attention, then I just checked out and didn't do well. But because I had the maturity at that point going through college, that that I made that is my purpose. There's no excuse for me to not put everything into it and do well. So that's what I did.
Yeah. So to summarize hindsight advice for other veterans to hear, transitioning to civilian, what are you advising?
Have a plan. I don't think that can be understated. And I know that sounds very broad and generalized, but at least give yourself options. And as you think about what you may or may not want to do when you get out and you transition out and everything, write down a few things that are interest for you. If it's cooking, would you consider being a chef or opening a restaurant? Do you find yourself, wanting to open up an apparel company selling shit for the unit that you served in? Or do you have that sort of entrepreneurial spirit? Do you want to work for a company and have paid time off? At least start thinking about those sorts of things so that you can start organizing yourself towards what might be that end goal, or creating that roadmap to where you want to go. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. Somebody floated the idea of finance by me. And I was like, yeah, because I invest and I feel confident that, someday I can be able to retire and I'll be comfortable. And why wouldn't I want to pass that on to other people? I was a bit of a idealist, but it just didn't work out. And it's just bad timing that happened during the greatest financial crisis since the Great Depression. So, I don't think that had I been prepared, I wouldn't have picked finance as something that I really wanted to do. It's just sort of something that got floated by me, and I got pulled into it by somebody that was in it, and they're like, "You'd be great at this." And I listened to them, and I might have been great at it if it wasn't 2008. I don't know, but it was years later when I was at kind of a crossroads in my life where I wasn't happy with where I was, and I couldn't go back to where I used to be. And I kind of drew a line in the sand. I was like, well, I'm not going to do this anymore. At the time, I was recruiting for a company that just recruited consultants for engineering positions, and you work with companies, you place them there, and there's no gratification in it. All they wanted me to do was dial a phone and talk to people and make sales. And it wasn't something I was passionate about. It wasn't something that I liked. It was something that I sort of painted myself in a corner of doing after working as a security contractor, which for anybody out there that's thinking about that and you're married, don't do that unless you want to be divorced. But I was over in Afghanistan in 2009. At the time, my oldest was 1 year old, and I got handed an ultimatum, like, you can stay there, but then don't come back. And so I went home and gave that up. But the company asked me to start recruiting so that I could weed out all the people that were misrepresenting themselves in their level of experience as an operator. And so I did that for a few years, and then as all the security contracts overseas started drying up, I kind of saw the writing on the wall, and I was all set to go back to college, and I was going to pursue a degree in engineering. And then life happens, family gets sick, and you drop everything, go take care of family, do what you got to do. But after that, I was like, we're kind of in a pinch financially, and I needed work. So I took this job. I did it for 6 years. I hated it. And I drew a line in the sand and said, I'm not going to do this anymore. And I walked in, threw the badge at the boss, and told him to F off, and I was out of there. And in hindsight, I don't recommend that either without a plan. So again, I did things oftentimes, in the moment, and not having that good plan. But it turns out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. And what I did was, after that, I took some time. I started networking. I got involved with different networking groups, things like that, around Phoenix area where I'm at. And you never know, you never know who you're going to meet going to those things. And, I'm not a real outgoing person. I don't like talking to people I don't know. That's just who I am. But what I started reflecting and realizing is that I was passionate about building things. And even though I hadn't done it professionally, I know that I was smart enough to be able to pick things up pretty fast. And I've always been a pretty handy person. I understand building concepts and things like that, but I didn't go to school for that. I went to school for business. But it was an introduction that was made through one of my neighbors to a guy that he knew, that introduced me to somebody else. He knew this person was hiring to run projects at Honeywell. And so I went and interviewed with that guy, and he says, the only reason I'm talking to you is because Tom told me that I should talk to you. And, at that point, I'm old enough. I'm not a dumb kid anymore. And I just told him, I'm like, look, I know that I'm going to be starting at the bottom, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with the money. All I need is an opportunity. Put me in there and let me learn. And I promise that you're not going to regret it. I heard a story years ago, and I'm not a big Patriots. In fact, I'm an anti-Patriots fan, and I've never been a fan of Tom Brady or Bill Belichick. But I remember hearing a story that, Tom Brady's first camp, mini camp or whatever, with the Patriots, 2000 or whatever that was, that he saw Robert Kraft in the hallways and went up to him and asked if Robert Kraft knew who he was, and he said yes. And I guess this is a story I heard. I don't know if it's true or not. That Tom Brady told Robert Kraft then that he was the best decision he ever made. And that's how I felt. If you hire me, it's going to be the best decision you ever made. And once I got that opportunity, I never lost that drive and that fire. And everything that I learned, I wanted to learn more. And so I worked for Honeywell, or not. I worked at Honeywell, not for Honeywell. I was actually with a company called JLL, and they were contracted by Honeywell to run all of their construction projects as a representative of Honeywell. And so I did that for 3 years before Honeywell canceled the contract with them and went with somebody else. And the Honeywell people wanted me to stay and transition to the new company. I was like, no, you people are sociopathic, and I'm out of here. And then that's what landed me with where I'm at the Opus group. And I absolutely love it here. And it was the same thing when I interviewed with my director here. I said, I've never been on the general contractor side of things. I've been on this other side acting as a representative of the owner, but I haven't I haven't been on your side, but all I need is the opportunity. You show me what I need to do, and I will be doing it better than anybody else.
That's awesome. You know, that way you said that story, it reminds me of when I asked you kind of advice on the marriage situation they were in, and you said swallow your pride. It reminded me of that, allowing you essentially to get involved in a great industry, hence why we're talking now, and grow in that industry. And that's really cool to hear. Going through that experience, what, right now to highlight kind of translatable skills, military to civilian profession, what are some kind of skills that you've been able to carry over?
Well, again, I keep my Ranger handbook. I mean, this thing is
That's awesome.
27 years old, something like that, and chapter 1 on leadership. I mean, there's pearls of wisdom in there. People always come in my office and are like, what is that? I'm like, that's one of the greatest books ever written. There's so much information in there. And of course, it's all printed in like size 3 font. So you got to have good glasses to be able to read it. But, the soft skills that as a veteran you bring, I worked with a guy here that he was a mechanic for like F-16s or F-15s in the Air Force. And it's interesting. You wouldn't think that, an Army Ranger and a fighter jet mechanic would have a lot in common, but we do. All of us veterans, we have something in common. Number one, we all volunteered for this stuff. Whatever we chose, whatever path we chose, we volunteered to do it. And then sometimes you volunteered more than once. But the military overall has certain tendencies, again, succession planning, for instance. They're always training people for that next higher level job. The military wants people to move up because the people above them want to move up. And it's the vacuum, right? It just pulls people up. But there's all these soft skills that we possess as veterans, integrity is one that comes to mind, accountability, responsibility. I'm generally the first person in the office every day, and one of the last to leave. And it's not because I have anything to prove. It's because I come in early because, number one, it doesn't bother me waking up early. I get up at 3:45 and go hit the gym, and then I get into work. And then if I need to leave early, I don't have to feel guilty about it. Like, if somebody says something, well, so I didn't see you here at 6:30 this morning. So, but, people know that they can count on me. And I think that most veterans, and of course there's always exceptions, but most veterans need to help those potential employers understand the soft skills that they have. And again, I don't think that a good employer, any employer you'd want to work for, any manager you'd want to work for, shouldn't expect you to have all the experience in what you're seeking to do. But all you need to do is get the opportunity to get in front of that person that makes that hiring decision and say, look, if you give me this opportunity, number one, I won't let you down. But I'm going to need some coaching and I'm going to need you to teach me what it is I need to be doing. But no one's going to outwork me. No one's going to outfox me. You can count on me because I'm going to be here every day. It's interesting, like in the civilian world, how many people are just not reliable. And I think that can't be understated. Doing the right thing. In our break room, I'm the guy that always runs the dishwasher and unloads it. Not because I don't want anybody to know that I do that. It just needs to be done. So you just go and do it. It's simple things like that. Where people that didn't serve, they don't even realize what they're not doing.
Right. Yeah. Well said. Principles and mentality to wrap all of that together. Absolutely agree. And I think it's awesome how you eventually found your way in the built environment. the initiating, I don't know, circumstance or thought was, I think, like you said, right, you just realized that you like to build things, and that was kind of why you started thinking in this direction.
Yeah, it's just,
Awesome.
what are the things that I was passionate about? Well, I've always enjoyed building things or fixing things.
Mm.
Um, I taught myself woodworking, and at the end of a project, when I finish a project in woodworking, when I'm done, I have so much pride. Of course, I see all the imperfections that no one else sees. I can see those, but those are learning mistakes, right? Like, oh, I'm not going to do that again. But it was realizing that I like building things and seeing them come together, and then the pride that I felt at the end of it when I saw a project completed. And it was that realization, that aha moment, that I was like, I'd be really good at this. And my dad is kind of, he worked in I'll say the construction industry, but basically he designed all the steel reinforcement that went into bridges and stuff like that. So he had this big drafting board at home, and he is a super anal retentive guy, which you have to be when you're designing all this rebar that goes into these massive reinforced structures. But I understood, how important it was to be responsible and everything. Just what it takes to create things and build it.
Sure.
Like I said earlier, I had almost gone back to college to pursue a degree in engineering. I was actually looking into civil engineering, and it just didn't work out. But I don't have any regrets, because now I work with civil engineers to be able to build things. So
Yeah.
I still got to kind of the same place by taking a different path. But
Yeah.
my advice to those transitioning out would be, think about the things that you're passionate about. Make a list of things that you do, that you would and would not want to do, and then start taking the steps to pursue those things. Start networking and talk to people that already do those things. Start with your family. Is there anybody in my family? Maybe it's a cousin that I haven't really met or haven't seen since I was in diapers. It doesn't matter who. Just start reaching out to people and saying, you do this, I'm coming out of the military, I'm interested in this, but I don't even know if it's for me or not. But would you join me for a coffee, or even a 15-minute phone call? I've got questions for you. But if you get that opportunity, you better have the questions. They better be thought out, and you better be prepared.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really great advice, man. I think people underrate just reaching out to others, right, and asking a question, ask for help, getting information. That's awesome advice. I can't emphasize how important that is enough, and especially now. I mean, just go on LinkedIn; it's really easy to figure out. Go to a local networking event; also really easy to figure out. So yeah, well said. That's awesome. Before closing out the civilian profession side, I want to check in, make sure I didn't miss anything. Anything else you want to add?
No, I mean, there's so much to talk about, on this subject. And again, I would say that there's been leaps and bounds that have been made, I think, by the military on transition assistance, especially over the last 20 plus years of all the GWAT, people getting out. And you've got a lot of people that struggled with things far worse than what I experienced. And so I think the military's gotten a lot better about helping people transition. But again, they can only take you so far. The military is only going to take you so far. The day you walk out, they've forgotten about you. And it's next man up. Again, going back to that succession planning. So it's your responsibility as the individual to take control of your own destiny and chart your course. And again, prepare yourself as far in advance as you can. And for some people, they might know what they want to do when they get out. I've got a buddy that got out after 10 plus years, and he went to PA school, and now he's a PA. He knew that's what he wanted to do, and that's great. I was just a lost soul that took all the wrong turns for years and eventually got to where I was meant to be. And, you know, the whole saying is, if you do what you love, you don't work a day in your life. And so every day I wake up, I'm excited to hit the gym and get to work and build things. And so I hope that every veteran is able to find that same sort of passion that gets them excited every day to go to work. And, but again, you've got to find the drive in yourself to figure out what you want to do. And you just can't depend on the military to do it for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Very well said. It absolutely takes some of your own efforts in combination with what's available to you in order to, you know, find your way. So yeah, very well said. Hindsight advice. That's awesome. I'm going to take kind of the back end of what you're talking there to get to our final two questions. Wellness, what does that look like for you?
Wellness for me is obviously working out, going to the gym. I'm just getting back into it after several months off. I had back surgery a few months ago, so it killed me not being able to go work out. So I'm getting back in there now, and I'm excited about that. I still can't run yet, so I'm looking forward to that because I've put on a little weight while I've been out recovering, and I just need to get this off. So I feel better and I feel more energized when I'm exercising regularly. And so I would definitely recommend those transitioning out. Don't go down the path of being lazy and not working out. Keep your body and your mind sharp by exercising.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. I hope you continue your path on recovery there. I know back injuries, man, it's not fun at all.
Yep.
So last question, we're going to go with any book or books you'd like to recommend. I encourage you also to, once again, plug in the book you got on your desk right now. That's fine.
I've already plugged that one enough. But no, I mean, I do enjoy reading, and I'll go in cycles where I'll read one book and then on to the next, on to the next, on to the next, and then you get kind of lazy and you take a break from it. Yeah. There's a lot of great books out there. I like nonfiction books. You know, I started out reading some Tom Clancy books, and some were good, some were not, and I just feel like there's so many greater stories out there that are real, that actually happened.
Agreed.
One of my favorite books is The Long Walk. I just finished a book, Alone at Dawn, that is about John Chapman, Medal of Honor winner, Air Force combat controller from the Battle of Pakar, Operation Anaconda. Very interesting book. I obviously like to read a lot of books on Ranger history. So
yeah, that's awesome. I'm going to add those books in the show links. Can you, I have no idea. Can you just buy the Ranger manual on Amazon or somewhere?
I have no idea, to be honest.
Well, we're going to find out if it's available on Amazon. It'll be linked in the show notes. Otherwise, you're going to have to find Brian and take his copy.
Yeah, it's changed or been updated. This is published July 1992. It's SH21-76. SH stands for Student Handout. But again, all this is a collection of material from other field manuals in the Army. But again, chapter 1 is like, when my son was, I don't know, probably 7 years old, he pissed me off, and I gave him my Ranger handbook, and I told him to read out loud all of chapter 1, and then I explained it to him, the parts that he didn't understand. So again, everybody should read that. There's just so much good information in there, and if you don't understand it, just sit there and reflect on it, because it's the leadership lessons in that short amount of pages is astounding.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm going to look it up. I hope it is available. If it is, again, I'm going to link that in the show notes. Brian, this was an awesome conversation, man. I really appreciate you taking the time, hashing out your life story. I learned a lot. I'm excited to share it to our audience.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. All right. See everyone. Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build. If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.jet.build.